One time, I moved to Colorado and went to a restaurant with my friends. Out walked this gorgeous guy who was serving our food. We instantly locked eyes, exchanged numbers, and I later found out that he was not only the owner of the restaurant and bar, but also a private chef, a celebrity barber, and even a former model. He had a lot of clients and was involved in many different ventures. We started dating, going on extravagant dates, and spending all our time together outside of work. He would cook for me every day, and everything seemed perfect until one day he told me that the house he was selling had finally sold, and he had to move out immediately. He said he was going to stay with his stepbrother because the house he was moving into wasn't finished yet. However, he admitted that he was uncomfortable staying there because he and his stepbrother didn't have the best relationship. Apparently, his stepbrother was an unforgiving narcissist who had never forgiven him for forgetting his birthday. I found that odd. He was from Colorado, yet he had no one else he could stay with? But being a Taurus in love, I volunteered to let him stay with me. Everything continued to go well. I was coming home every day to a delicious meal and my best friend. Then, one day, I came home from work and found him curled up on the side of the bed, bawling his eyes out. I comforted him and asked what was wrong. Through tears, he told me that his dad had been diagnosed with brain cancer and only had 1 year to live. I hugged him, put him to bed, and took care of him. The next day, he told me he had to go to Alabama to see both of his parents. I drove him to the airport, dropped him off, and he stayed there for about a week. When I picked him up, he was a little emotional, but seemed okay. About a week later, he told me he had gotten a contract to cut hair for the Super Bowl team and wanted me to come with him. I was beyond excited. Before this, I had worked in sports, and the Super Bowl was the pinnacle of the industry. I took time off work, told my dad, told my friends, I was all in. Time passed, and he had been staying with me, saying he would cover the rent. But when the rent was due, he told me he couldn't pay it yet because he had a private chef event and had to pay his restaurant workers. Something had happened with the co-owner of the restaurant, but that wasn't my business. I told him it was fine, covered the rent myself, and he eventually paid me back after his event. Then, the week of the Super Bowl arrived. I had everything packed and kept asking him about the flight details. He kept stalling, saying he would get them for me. Finally, he came to me, crying, and said his aunt had died, and he had to go to Louisiana immediately. He was devastated, so I took him to the airport. He stayed there for a week. I picked him up when he returned, and although I was disappointed about missing the Super Bowl, I cared more about supporting him. I took him out to a restaurant, and we had a nice time. He had 1 drink, and I had 2 or 3. On the way home, my phone went off. I glanced at it and put it down. He immediately questioned me about it, and I casually explained that it was just an old high school friend messaging me on Snapchat. I didn't think anything of it. When we got home, everything took a terrifying turn. Out of nowhere, he flew into a blind rage. Up until that point, we had never argued. He was screaming, livid. "Who the heck was that on your phone?" He started throwing things around my apartment and chasing me. This man was 6 feet 3 inches and nearly 300 pounds. He bear hugged me, tossed me to the ground, and I was in utter shock. Before this, he had been a complete gentleman. I managed to push him out of my apartment, but he didn't leave. Instead, he started throwing rocks. No, not even rocks. More like chunks of stone, up at my 3rd-story balcony and front door. He was banging on the door, and I was convinced he was going to climb up the balcony. I called the cops. They came but couldn't find him. As soon as they left, he started throwing rocks again. I called the cops again, and once again, they couldn't find him. At this point, I started doing some digging. I had never met his family before, so I found his stepbrother number and called him. I told him, "Hey, your brother's tripping. I don't know if he's having an emotional or psychotic breakdown, but he is going crazy." He called him while I was on the line, and I mentioned his dad's cancer diagnosis. His brother was confused. "Cancer?" he said. I went on to say that I had just dropped him off at the airport a few weeks ago to go to his aunt's funeral in Louisiana. That's when he dropped a bomb on me. He said he hasn't been to Louisiana or Alabama in over 5 years. My stomach dropped. Who the hell had I been laying next to for the past 3 months? His dad ended up calling me, saying he was sending his son to come get him. The next morning, I got up to go to work, opened my car door, and there he was, sleeping in my back seat. I was in complete shock. "What are you doing?" I asked. He replied, "Oh, I was just waiting for you to come out so we could talk about what happened last night." What kind of psycho sleeps in a car in the dead of winter just to talk to me when he has a cell phone? I let him stay in my apartment while I went to work, but I immediately called his dad. His dad told me to keep him there until his brother arrived. When his brother finally showed up, he told me everything. This man had scammed football players. He had never worked at the Super Bowl. He had scammed his ex-fiancée, ruined her credit, and almost got her arrested. They had broken up just 1 month before he met me. His own family and friends had disowned him for lying. And that restaurant/bar he supposedly owned, he was just a chef there. On top of that, he had laundered money and tricked people into investing in a restaurant he didn't even own. His brother packed up all his things, forced him out of my apartment, and I never heard from that man again. So, yeah, be careful who you are dating. Do your research.
Please like and subscribe for new weekly stories. Thank you.